I was 14 when I learned that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they're so good at pretending to be normal that only children and animals seem to be able to see right through them. This happened to myself, my mother, and my sister, but I'm going to be vague with the locations and names because it was a pretty serious situation, and I don't want people to potentially try and look me up. However, I do like sharing it, even though like is an odd word to use here, because it's a great reminder for others to truly trust your instincts, or the instincts of others for that matter. Back in the early 2000s, I think it was 2004, my mother planned a vacation for the three of us. My parents separated a few years prior, and because he was kind of a deadbeat, we moved in with our mom. We were living at my grandparents' house for about a year, and then my grandparents helped my mom get a small house for us. I know things were a little tight at first, but it wasn't too bad. My dad never had a stable job. He would get fired or just quit, saying he wasn't happy with it, but was never in a rush to find a new job. I may have been young, but I could tell that it was a struggle for my mother. She worked long hours trying to work extra just to get as much money as she could. Finally, after my mom had to bail out my dad for a DUI and resisting arrest, she left him. Having our own place was a relief. There were no fights, nothing being thrown around and broken, and no scraping together money for food after having spent it all on alcohol. We were happy, and were all doing pretty well. My mom even had her glow coming back to her, and it made me really happy. So, after about a year at our new place, my mom had saved up enough for us to go on a family vacation, just the three of us. We all enjoy going to the park or going fishing together, so we agreed that a road trip to a national park would be perfect for us. We even went shopping for some good supplies and hiking clothes and shoes. We made plans to hike through this part, stopping at one of the gazebos for lunch and then continuing on. We even found out they had fishing pole rentals so that we could fish there too. We were all very excited for this. As I mentioned, it was myself, a 14-year-old female, my younger sister Bailey, who was 11 years old, and my mom going on a trip. We were at the entrance checking our packs, making sure we had everything that we needed when he approached. He was wearing what you would normally expect someone to wear at a large hiking park. He introduced himself as Dave and asked if we were from around there. My mom said no and explained that we were here on vacation. Dave explained how he wasn't from the state, but that this was one of his favorite parks because of the views from the top of the cliffs. As he continued to talk, I could see that my mom was intrigued by the guy. It was the look on her face when she got that male attention that made her feel special. I couldn't say that I understood at the time, but as an adult, I do now. However, something about him just made my skin crawl. I didn't know what it was. He seemed really nice. He said all the right things to my mom and to us, but when he looked at Bailey and I, his eyes just felt wrong. It wasn't simple eye contact, but more like a predator watching its prey. Every time he glanced in our direction, my stomach would churn. He talked my mom into letting him walk with us, which I did not approve of. I was already upset that this was now becoming less of our mother-daughter vacation, but it was because of this guy of all people. He offered to show us a less traveled viewpoint, and my mom was intrigued. I tried squeezing my mom's hand to get her attention and tell her that I didn't want to, but she just looked at me, smiled, and mouthed, "It's okay." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that as long as she was around, we were safe. But this guy was not right, and it was clouding my confidence and clouding my mother's judgment. For about an hour or so, we tracked along with this guy, doing his damnedest to woo my mother. He was telling her the history of the park, told her about his childhood, and going there with his mother. The whole time, Bailey and I refused to leave each other. I could tell by her eyes that she did not trust this man either. We both tried everything we could to express our discomfort to our mom, praying that she would telepathically understand, or at least sense how uncomfortable we were feeling, but nothing seemed to work at all. Dave just continued to smile at us and include us in the conversation, no matter how much we ignored him. But then we had one last chance to convince our mom. We stopped at a shelter to have lunch when Dave mentioned another trail that had an amazing view of the mountain, but it was a short drive away. He offered to take us there, or said that we could follow him out there, claiming it was a view that you just had to see when you visited the state. I just remember how scared Bailey looked, and she shook her head at me. I knew that I had to be the problem child. I immediately cut them off to shout, "No, Mom, this was supposed to be our trip." My mom looked at me, surprised by my outburst. I told her that neither of us wanted to go anywhere with this guy. My mom grabbed my hand and squeezed it, and she apologized to Dave. She told him how important this trip was for us and would talk it over with us first. Dave again smiled and said that he understood. He said that he would continue down the trail, but if we wanted to go, he would meet us at the entrance in about 2 hours. My mom agreed and said that we would meet him there. He waved at us and said that it was nice to meet us, and then he walked off. Once he was out of view, I told my mom how I felt. I remember being almost in tears as I told her how I felt about this guy. I would look over at Bailey for affirmation, and she just kept nodding in agreement. To my surprise, my mom nodded and said that she understood. She explained as we ate how she started getting an uneasy feeling herself, but had been fighting it, not wanting her trust issues to ruin a friendly interaction. She promised that she had no intentions on going with him outside the park, and there was such a huge relief when she said that. She suggested that we eat fast, and that way we could hurtle back to the entrance before the 2 hours were up and leave before we got there. I never choked down a sandwich so quickly in my life. We all walked the rest of the trail, determined to get back quickly. We hardly stopped to look at our surroundings, which was disappointing, but I also understood. I just wanted to get out of there. When we reached the parking lot, Mom told us to get in the car and lock the doors. I didn't know what she was doing, but I watched her walk to the building at the entrance. I remember going there when we first arrived. You could buy souvenirs and supplies there, so I thought it was odd that my mom chose to stop in there. I was nervous, constantly looking around, hoping that Dave would not show up. Finally, my mom came jogging back to the car. She smiled at us and said that everything was fine and that we were out of there. I was happy. Not as happy as when Dave finally walked away, but leaving that park without seeing him again lifted such a huge weight off of my shoulders. I honestly felt like there was something sinister about him, something that I had no proof of, but I just knew that he was bad. Hang in with me here, because this is relevant, I promise. Several years later, when I was 18 years old, I was sitting at home with my mom on a day off. Bailey was still in school. We'd been watching one of those true crime shows. I don't remember which one, but it was similar to America's Most Wanted. What I saw nearly sent me into a panic attack. I heard my mom make a sound, and I looked up at the TV. There on the screen was Dave, except his real name was not Dave. He was wanted for the murders of a mother and her 2 daughters in a neighboring state. What's worse is that the murders happened just 2 months after we met him. And to make it worse, they were on vacation, not from the state. Once that episode was over with no update on it, I ran to the computer to look him up by the name given from the show. Since it had aired, he had been arrested and had confessed to the murders. I thought I was going to be sick. This man that walked with us several years ago at that park, the man that offered to drive the 3 of us somewhere secluded, had killed a mother and her 2 young daughters. That very easily could have been us. There were news articles from the state that the women were from and where they were found, detailing what happened, what evidence there was, and it was all just so eye-opening. I remember yelling at my mom about it. I wasn't exactly mad at her, but more so just scared about the entire situation. If my mom had not refused his offer, where would we be right now? And that off feeling my sister and I had the whole time, there was a reason for it. We just did not know at the time. I ended up calling some kind of non-emergency number for the state that he was charged in to try and figure out where I could report our experience. I knew he was already locked up, but since he may have tried a very similar thing on us that he did with his victims, I wanted it on record. I was able to get a hold of somebody and told them everything we remembered, but I never heard anything else from them, so I don't know if it made a difference. I also learned at that time that my mom had gone into that building to report to someone there that there was a strange man following us and trying to get us to leave with them. I'm still curious if they ever found him there too. Hell, I'm curious if there were more victims that haven't been found and that he has not mentioned. It's a truly terrifying thought, and the guilt of knowing that we were lucky to get away from him but couldn't do anything about it either has been something that has always weighed heavily on my mind, now that I am an adult. I still go on walks or hikes with friends or my husband, but that experience has always stuck in my mind. Now if I ever get that off feeling, I don't question those instincts. There is a reason that it's telling me to run, and I would rather get out of that situation first before I question it. Non-tripping Leo here. No personal experiences to report, but I have some about our county jail that are all second-hand from old-timers. Deputy dies on the booking desk from a massive heart attack or stroke. Deputy who died always worked level 9, top floor, worst of the worst, violent criminals. Also contains max 1 and 2, but not the whole. Disciplinary isolation. New deputy replacing deceased one is doing his rounds on the night shift. Inmate bangs on the door, asking if he brought him that request form, just like he promised. Deputy is like, dude, this is the first time I've ever spoken to you. Inmate insists that he just spoke to a deputy, and he said that he'd be back around with one. Block slider door closes, with deputy still speaking to inmate. Deputy working in the control room swears that he saw another deputy walk out of the block into the next one. B to C, if I recall correctly. Everyone claims that sometimes you can hear knocking on the control room door to be let in. There is only 2 deputies on a floor max, and there is 3 doors between the inmates and the floor control room. Deputy on level 7, non-violent, claims a mop bucket levitated and flew into the main slider door. He was deeply asleep and heard a loud crash. Mop bucket was originally right next to the control room. Bucket would have had to make a 90-degree turn and went approximately 45 feet down a perfectly level hall to slam into a door and overturn. This time, level 3, violent, disciplinary action, medical, contagious, crazy, shitty floor. Cameras in all cells to verify that no one is doing anything stupid or dying at a glance. Deputy sees 2 shadows moving in a cell in the hole. Cameras only display in black and white. There's only supposed to be 1 guy in that cell. Rushes over. Verifies that there is only 1 guy in that cell. Tries to get back out. Goes through the first door. It closes. Second one, into the main hall, is closed and locked. Key won't open lock. Here's laughter. Is stuck between the doors for 2 hours until discovered by sleeping partner, who was awake when he entered the hole. The guy in the cell was involved in some occult murder type shit. P.S. Deputy who died in the first story claimed the week previous that he had seen red eyes and a black shadow pacing around his control room, laughing at him. P.P.S. I've heard strange sounds in the stairwells between the floors myself before. Allegedly, there were shankings and suicides in these stairwells. TLDR. Jails are creepy, even in normal operation. Fine. Now with more green texting. I guess I kinda lied, because I guess I find this creepy. Working booking desk. Scared kid, 18 years old, comes in. Looks absolutely terrified. Brought in for DV against parents. Stares off into space. Starts shaking, foaming at the mouth. Ranting about how he tried and tried. Tried to do what? What the master told me. What did the master tell you to do? Kill them, or he would kill me. Starts weeping uncontrollably. Me and another guy grabs him to try steer him back into a cell of his own so that he could calm down. Kid stiffens. Suddenly, projectile vomit everywhere. Pisses and shits himself. I and other guy dodge. Office man, inmate worker, is not so lucky. After finishing, no lie, there is about a 1/4 inch thick spot of vomit, piss, and shit on the booking floor. Office man is covered. Kid sits down in the middle of this unholy concoction and just starts rocking. Entire booking area nips hard. Office man is super pissed. Kid eventually is released to Bryce, mental health, without further incident. Hey X, I'm not well versed in Greentext, so deal with it. I thought I'd share my experiences, so please tell me if any of you have any explanations for this. I'm currently at college. However, I grew up on an island in the Puget Sound called Vashon Island. We hid a small rowboat and bayliner boat that I used to explore around the Puget Sound, and also used for crabbing. When I was 17, me and my friends would boat out into the middle of the Puget Sound to smoke weed and party. Over time, I made friends with this drifter type who was living out on a sailboat, anchored and docked in harbor. It's between the legs of the island in the picture. The guy on the boat would usually smoke some weed with me when I brought some alcohol. Because he did not have a car, he could not really get any supplies, so I would make some runs to town for the guy once a month, and we became good friends. One night, I got so wasted that I ended up crashing in a spare bunk on the boat. Around 10 p.m., I started to hear a tapping on the hull. This is not entirely uncommon, so I did not care at first. Over time, the tapping developed into an incessant knocking. It sounded like someone was under the boat knocking. Hearing this, the guy, who I will call Smokey because he is a chain smoker, woke up and asked me, "Anon, want to see something trippy?" He got out some weighted rope that is typically used for crabbing so that the line does not float in the water, and attached a hook to the end, after which he opened up a can of Spam and skewered the Spam onto the hook and headed to the deck. It was very dark out because of the overcast sky, so the only light that we had came out from the cabin. He lowered the hook into the water and tied off the other end to the boat. The line straightened out and jerked around for a couple minutes as we just sat there. Once the line stopped jerking, Smokey hauled the line out of the water. Pulling the hook into the light, a few Coors Banquet beer cans were skewered onto the hook. Smokey looked at me with a serious look on his face and told me not to litter my beer cans again. With an angry look on his face, Smokey told me to stay there, and he headed back into the hold. A few minutes later, he emerged and handed me a quarter, which he instructed me to toss into the water and apologize. Not sure what was going on, I did as I was told and flipped the quarter into the water. Following my experience with Smokey, every time I went boating, I would flip a quarter into the water as some sort of good luck charm. During crab season a few years later, me and my buddies launched our crab pots and got started drinking, during which we decided to grab some food at a nearby restaurant that served boats, called Tide's Tavern. Finally returning, we started to retrieve our crab pots. We retrieved our crab pots and pulled the boat out of the water and headed back home to start preparing our catch. After I had boiled the crabs, I started the gutting process. For context, when you gut a crab, you first have to boil it, and then with a knife, there is this tab on their bellies that you can tear open. After you have done this, you can rip the top of the shell out to dispose of the brains and whatnot. After this has been completed, you can break the crab in half and you're all done. Upon cracking the crab's upper shell, I was shocked to discover quarters in the shell cavity of every crab. When we pulled the crabs out of the water, they were still alive, so the quarters would have had to have been in there at the time. Nothing like this ever happened again while crabbing, and I have not been able to find anything online. If any Anons here want to see if you can experience anything similar, my crab grounds that I went to are located near the entrance to Quartermaster Harbor on the side of Maury Island. Vashon Island is actually 2 islands connected, and Maury is the smaller one. This story comes from a radio DJ named Chunga on 101.9 The End, a UT radio station. Chunga is a big guy, 6'3", that worked as a security guard with some college football guys. He gets a job to help clear out this old building so it can be used as a haunted house. Pick Related is the place. They go around looking for the caretaker, has not been heard from for 3 months. The place has been partially burnt down and rebuilt numerous times in the past. It's an old building, so all of the doors are old, lock on themselves, or open up into an empty room with no floor. Hallways are 3 feet wide and the ceilings are low, old building. They finally find the caretaker on the 3rd floor. The caretaker took his own life with a revolver. Content: his body was dehydrated and virtually mummified, slumped over in a rocking chair across from an old fireplace. His stiff hand held a scrawled note: "I'm going to the master. I give up. You win." This room he shot himself in is called the Heart Room. It's where most of the bad shit happens in this place. Murders, assaults, and the fires in the past originated from this room. Next week, they get the place set up for the haunted house. Some history. The place was originally a paper mill. One April Fool's Day it caught fire, and when the firemen were called, they ignored it, thinking it was a prank. It burned down, with over 50 people inside of it. It was later refurbished and used as a dance hall, then a country lodge, and in the 60s, a disco. Because of this, there is a large main hall in the center of the building. This hall contains the disco ball, and when Chunga was working as a guard there, they used the hall to move quickly from one part of the haunted house to another. The most dangerous part of working as a guard is collecting money and depositing it in the bank, and haunted houses during the season take in a lot of money, up in the tens of thousands per night. Large successful ones can get into 100,000, but for this job, there was something the guards came down to fistfights. The guards would fight over who would go through the last place to turn off all the lights and make sure that the kids weren't hiding in the rooms. Just like OP's story, flashlights would die instantly. Chunga and the rest of the guards had to wear cargo pants, loaded with 8 fresh batteries every night. If that wasn't enough, the doors would lock on their own, often leaving a guard calling for help. Doors were everywhere and in the worst places. Staircases had no landing and would have a door at the top and the bottom. These would lock for no reason. Keep in mind these are men, 6'5" to 6'6", left crying after getting through this place. One night, Chunga and another guard thought they finished when they saw a light on in one of the rooms. They decided to go back and check. Chunga opened the door when his partner shook. "Chunga, the lamp isn't plugged in." Chunga double-checked the lamp. The plug was not in, so he flipped the switch when it shocked him, and then the lamp flickered. His buddy abandoned him as he was trying to relax from his jitters. Next night, they started hearing a dog howl from inside different rooms. At first, they thought it was a stray, but when they opened the door, there would not be any dog there. The dog would make noises once in a while each night, from doors and hallways that the guards had just gone through. The longer you were inside the place, the longer it seemed to drain you. You would get tired and start hearing and seeing things. This all finally culminated, and the guards finally quit, and the haunted house finished for the season. Being a DJ, Chunga would get into ghost stuff after this, and research the place a little more. It has burned down at least 3 times. It has been used as a dance hall, mountain lodge, and disco. One of the early caretakers owned a dog, which died with him in one of the fires. The most common story you can find about the place goes like this. Be caretaker. Live on the premise with wife. Be concerned about an old wall falling down. Gets tractor to knock over the wall. Stop. Go back to wife. Loads revolver. Let's play Russian roulette. Shoots himself in front of wife. One student from the University of Utah wanted to research the place. Brought $25,000 worth of equipment. This is around the 90s. Lock me in for the night. They lock him in. Busts a 2nd-story window. Jumps out. Leaves the equipment for a friend to get. Never wants to talk about the place again. For the next few Halloweens, Chunga would camp out in front of the mill and beg kids not to go in. He compared the haunted ship, RMS Queen Mary, as a picnic compared to this mill. When I was about 11 to 12, my friend and I were hanging out alone at my house one afternoon. We were bored, so we decided to go goof around in the garage where there was a large bin of outdoor toys. The garage door was closed at the time. He picked out a skateboard and started riding around in a circle while I picked up a water gun with just a little water left in it. It was a Super Soaker style water gun, so it had a pump on the front. As I pumped, the last little bit of water left in the tank started sputtering out as a mist with a white noise kind of noise. In the midst of that sound, I heard, clear as anything I've ever heard in my life, a woman's voice hissing my name right into my ear. I was stunned, so I stopped cold while my brain tried to process the situation. I then noticed that my friend had stopped on the skateboard and was looking at me, wide-eyed, so I knew that he had heard it too. Long story short, we ran the hell back into the house and did not go back into the garage for a while. Not the craziest story, but I still have no idea how to explain it, and it wasn't an obvious false memory like some other childhood stories that people have. especially since my friend corroborates it to this day. Reminds me of this Redditor last year, maybe still doing this, where he found that a deaf aid app that filters sounds and enhances certain frequencies for human speech, where he found that if he asked questions near running water, monitoring the audio with headphones, then he would get clear definitive answers from the water noise. A theory explaining this I have found before is that ghosts seem to have to use things already existing in this dimension as a sort of medium for their message. Also, that they can manipulate such things. So perhaps the friend doing circles on his wheelie board was creating a hypnotic sound, a la Danny in The Shining. This set the mental scene. Then the squeak of the super soaker spraying mist happened to be the similar frequencies of women's human whisper, and your granny ghost or dead twin or whatever was like, sweet, now is my chance, and on, into your right ear. Living in an older apartment with roommate. He had a cat for a while, was pretty cool. Cat comes into my room most nights to sleep next to me, very comfy. Roommate breaks up with GF, cat goes with her. A few months pass. Start feeling a small creature jump on my bed at night when I'm half asleep. Sometimes feel it slowly walk up, hand around the bed. Figure it's just a dream / memory of roommate's former cat. Starts to happen when I'm still conscious, before falling asleep, or wakes me up in the middle of the night, and I still feel it when I'm fully awake. Never feel afraid. Actually feel serene and comforted when it happens. Rational part of me figures it's just the mattress springs that are going out, or gusts of wind / air pressure changes messing with my blanket. Not fully convinced though, because there is a noticeable bounce when it first happens, then deliberate patterns of steps which matches pace in the manner of a small animal walking. One night I say aloud, "Hey, buddy, can you take it easy? I have to get up early." It immediately stops. Get new GF. She stays over one night. She wakes me from sleep, shaking me urgently. Anon, what is that? Is something on the bed? We both feel a small creature walking around. We both see small indentations being made on top of the blanket. Ask it to just rest because we are trying to sleep. Movement stops. Overall, it was a pleasant experience. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but it was never frightening. It felt like something that knew me and just wanted to be close to me. Lots of other paranormal events happened at that apartment, experienced by multiple people. I would also have frequent pleasant dreams of glowing geometric shapes or beautifully colored UFOs appearing outside my window. The dreams would end with a deluge of information flowing into my mind. I could not make out most of it, but it always left me with a feeling that reality was more complex and beautiful than we are capable of consciously understanding. Be me. Several years back. Summer vacation. I'm 16 years old. In the living room watching a movie, parents out of town. It's late. All the lights are off, except for the dim bulb over the stove. Just outside the kitchen, there is a large bookshelf against the wall, just barely within range of the dim stove light. From where I'm sitting, I can only see the side of it. No view of any of the books or anything, but I hear what sounds like several books falling over. Glance over. From my spot on the couch, I can hear books being shuffled around, but can't see shit. All of a sudden, a book goes flying off the shelf. Straight outwards, about 5 feet, like someone tossed it. I freeze. Can't believe what I see next. A large, hairy hand reaches out of the bookshelf from where the books would be. Hairy hand gropes around like it is looking for something. Does this for a few seconds, then disappears back into the bookshelf. Noises stop. My face went.